There you see him there, Congressman John Garamendi served the people. He served the people of California. Has been serving them since 2009. Thank you, Congressman. Good to see you,
Thank you, Don.
Congressman. I have to ask you. Folks are wondering, like, what can we do? There are no repercussions. They feel like the citizens or the people of Minnesota are being terrorized, and they're worried about it coming to them. They want to know what our lawmakers are doing. But I believe there are some issues with appropriation and the Department of Homeland Security. There may be, let's just say, there may be some recourse for people, and it'll start with you guys in the Department of Homeland Security.
Don, you're absolutely correct. The citizens, Americans, are really, really concerned and very angry about the way ICE is being used around this nation as a domestic police force. Even to the point today, ICE is going to investigate fraud. That's a normal police activity in the communities. That's a major extension of the ICE already. And we have the opportunity here in Congress to do something about this. The appropriation for ICE ends at the end of this month. The continuing resolution that extended the funding way back in December terminates at the end of January, and the appropriations, the money for ICE, will be up. It gets a little detail along the way, but we have the opportunity, if we fight fiercely, we can then force reforms of ICE. Some of these are just basic police reforms, identification, body cams, training, all of that must be part of any reform. But I think we can go further here. I think if we stand together and the Republicans are as fractured as they are, and the vote is close, it may very well be that we have an opportunity to go after the 10-year funding that ICE has as a result of the big ugly bill. They've got their funding under law. There's nothing we can do in the appropriation to reduce or to hold back that funding. But we may have the opportunity to write a new law. That is to change the big ugly funding, mandatory funding for ICE. I want us to be strong. We've got to fight back here. And we're given an opportunity in the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, as we run up to the end of January, where the funding for government agencies terminates.
So, Congressman, you said you can't withhold their funding, meaning DHS, but you can't. This is an opportunity to create a law. What does that mean? How long? What does that entail? How long would it take?
Well, we're about to get into the appropriation weeds here. In the big ugly bill, there was guaranteed funding for the next decade, $170 billion for Department of Homeland Security ICE program. And that's mandatory. That's in the law. The appropriators cannot change that. They can make certain requirements, improving the quality of care, such things as training, body cams, and so forth. That can be done, but the funding is there. However, if the Republicans do not have the votes, we then have the leverage and the opportunity to rewrite the big ugly bill as it pertains to, well, all of it, but specifically to the mandatory funding for ICE. It can be restricted, can be diverted to other things, healthcare, education, whatever. That's a separate piece of legislation. If that leverage moment arrives, we need to be prepared, not only to put into the appropriation bill improvements in the way ICE operates, but also to fundamentally change their funding stream so that we, as members of Congress and the Senate, have the ongoing authority to move the ICE money wherever it may be necessary or to restrict it.
Okay. And that would take a certain amount of time. My question is, having just read what Donald Trump posted earlier today, as we were taping this, that he is threatening to invoke the Insurrection Act. And he says it's going to take care of all of that. And he called the people who are, protesters in Minnesota, he called them insurrectionists. I mean, the irony of what he did with the insurrectionists, pardoning them. But what happens if Donald Trump does invoke the Insurrection Act?
He becomes the ultimate dictator. All restraints are off. He can do whatever he wants to do. The Supreme Court is questioning his authority on many of these issues, including the deployment of ICE and the National Guard in various cities. But the Insurrection Act would allow him to be the ultimate dictator, no restrictions at all. Now, we're proposing legislation to rewrite the Insurrection Act, but that hasn't even been heard in committee. This is how he would become the American dictator. No restraints at all. It is a fundamental problem, and frankly, it is a very scary situation because we know that he will do weird, wild things, not only internationally, which he could do if he has the Insurrection Act, and domestically, you name it, he would have the power, and that has to be addressed. Insurrection Act is 2 centuries old now, and it is out of date, and we must reform it, not only for Donald Trump, but for whomever may be president in the future.
People are wondering why, Congressman, that the governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, why he won't deploy the National Guard. Now, I spoke with Representative Gomez recently, and he said, well, then Donald Trump can turn around and federalize those National Guard members, which would not be good. Is that indeed correct or no?
Well, it is correct, but you're looking at a series of scenarios here. Walz could deploy the National Guard, and it would be under his authority. He would be able to direct, restrict, or allow whatever would be necessary. If Trump took that and then federalized it, the power then shifts to Trump. And the argument that we have successfully made to the court is that the deployment of the National Guard by the federal government is not necessary and not done properly. That is, you don't have the authority and the governor involved. It would be, I understand why Walz is hesitant here, because Trump may very well jump at this and say, ha, there you go. Now I'm going to take over the National Guard and I'm going to do this or that. And if in fact he's serious about the Insurrection Act, he really has carte blanche to do whatever he wants to do. He would be the dictator. And it would, Insurrection Act could or probably would be nationwide, not just Minnesota.
It would be nationwide, not just Minnesota. You mean that he would federalize the National Guard in Minnesota and use that as a precedent and a precursor to do it all over the country?
The Insurrection Act basically allows the president to do whatever he wants to do, wherever he thinks it's necessary. And he could dream up, well, Minnesota may be the problem. Certainly there are issues that have arisen in Chicago, California, and other states. So yes, this is a major, major concern of those of us who look at him and say, this man wants to be a dictator. How can he do that? The Insurrection Act. Basically, Trump's attitude is, stop me if you can. He'll do something that is clearly unconstitutional, clearly contrary to the law, and basically he says, well, stop me. By the time it gets to the court, it may be a Supreme Court. It's certainly going to be 6 months, maybe a year, maybe 2 years before the Supreme Court would deal with this specific issue. Now, you add to that the power of the Insurrection Act, and we just have a different America with a president that is already displaying every sign that he wants to be a dictator. And in fact, he said he would. He said, I'm going to be day one. Well, we're now almost 365 days into it, and he's just continuing his dictatorship.
You know, Congressman, you know what people are asking? Like they're wondering what their lawmakers are doing. I've had people say, well, why aren't my Minnesota lawmakers out here in the streets or, more visible fighting for me? And so they're wondering, like, what can Congress, what can their elected officials do? And it appears at this point, it's just behind the scenes strategery, so to speak. They're concerned that this president is unstoppable and will in fact become a complete dictator. That's a concern. And they're wondering, where are their lawmakers, local, state, national, where are they on this?
Well, I certainly hear that, and I certainly understand, and I certainly am frustrated. My power is limited to articulating a message, as I am now, um, rallying the people in my district, and passing or introducing legislation. Now, we do have specific moments where the leverage opportunity shifts to the Democrats. Keep in mind, it is a very, very close one vote uh, difference within the House of Representatives. If the Republicans have an absentee, then the power may very well shift to the Democrats. And at that point, it's a leverage point. If that becomes more permanent, we could uh, establish a new speakership. In other words, take over the House. If the Republicans have a permanent or semi-permanent shortage of votes and we have more, we can then run the House. We think about this all the time. We're planning for it as it becomes just now a one vote margin for the Republicans. It may happen. Now, that's out there in the maybe, but really every single day, we're working on specific legislation, working in the appropriation processes, and doing what I'm doing with you, and that is becoming a voice. Back in the district, interviews, rallying the crowd. Last night, I finished at 12 o'clock East Coast time with talking to my constituents about the specific issue you talked about. How can we stop Trump? So it's be prepared, get the legislation together, look for the moments where the leverage changes from the Republicans to the Democrats, and we can then pass specific legislation. Would Trump veto it? Possibly. But some of this he may not be able to do. We can do the hearings and we can prepare. Bottom line of this is there is an election coming up in 9 months, and that election is critical. We did Prop 50 in California. We redistricted the state of California and created an opportunity to pick up 5 new Democratic seats that are currently held by Republicans. That is a major, major blow to the Republicans. That is a result of the advocacy and the determination of the Democrats, together with the support of California voters, to shift the power balance here in Washington, D.C. Now, we've got to complete this. We're on second base. We've got to get to home plate. We've got to win those elections. And so that's where all of us who are concerned about Donald Trump, whether you're in California, New York, or Kansas, that's where you engage. You engage in the elections, and the opportunities across the nation are there. It's possible that we have a blue wave. That blue wave is caused by Trump and his excesses, but also caused by the men and women of America going to the streets and getting involved in the election process. So all across the country, in every state, we may be able to pick up states, seats that we never thought possible because people are angry.
How do you get to the polls, though, Congressman, if there's, been an Insurrection Act and we're in a police state and won't that suppress the vote? Won't people be afraid to even go to the polls? I think that people believe that that's what he's trying to do, influence the election, one, through suppression, and so on. But, if you can't get there, you can't have a blue wave.
That's where you and I must engage. Mm-hmm. And we simply have to, if that happens, if that scenario plays out, then what do we do? Well, we may not be able to vote, but we can demonstrate. We can be in the streets. We can do what is legally and safely demonstrate. We ought to be doing that now in anticipation of this. The concern about Trump using the Insurrection Act and stopping the election process, it could happen. It could happen. But that is a major, major step. Keep in mind that during the Civil War, there were elections. Now, the southern states were not allowed to vote because they had seceded from the Union, and at that point, were not part of our United States. But the rest of the nation did vote, even in the Civil War, which was about as complex and dangerous as possible. So, never give up. Keep fighting in wherever you happen to be. Join democratic organizations, organize. And if Trump somehow stops the vote, then we're going to have to be in the streets.
Mm-hmm. Can we talk about Greenland and Venezuela? I'm going to start with Venezuela, okay? Because the opposition leader there, Maria Machado, is meeting with Donald Trump today. And if he declines to endorse her following the U.S. capture of Nicolas Maduro, what do you think? What happens?
Well, maybe he will endorse her. He's been saying nice things about her. Let's step back for a moment.
But he's been saying, pardon me for cutting you off, but he's been saying he likes her, but he doesn't think that she's up for the job, basically, is what his stance has been.
Well, if he likes her, what he could do is to maintain the Maduro government and maintain the repression, civil rights, and other horrible things that the Maduro did as president. As his vice president, she now runs the exact same repressive government. All of the secret police are under her control. The military is under her control. The only thing that's changed is Maduro has been removed. The rest of it is all in place. Now, she's saying very nice things and probably playing Donald as a fool. And we'll see the result of this. She's released a few political prisoners. She's making some nice steps. But do keep in mind that the repressive Maduro government remains in place. And at some point, Donald Trump will be off to another adventure, perhaps Greenland, or maybe he wants to take over Germany, I don't know, or Mexico. But he'll be off to something else. And I am absolutely certain that the Maduro government, which remains in place, despite the deployment of 15,000 American soldiers and unlimited number of airplanes and helicopters and ships, the Maduro government did disappear. It's there. And she's, as this woman is saying nice things to Donald, probably playing him as a fool.
Let's talk about Greenland, since you mentioned it. How seriously should we'll see what happens with Venezuela. Let's talk about Greenland. How seriously should we take Trump's threats to Greenland?
Never underestimate Trump. He is doing what he said he wanted to do 8 years ago. During his first administration, he talked about Greenland and it ought to be part of the United States. So take him seriously. How can he do this? Well, negotiations apparently at the White House yesterday did not resolve and certainly did not accommodate in any way Trump's desire to own Greenland. I met last night with the foreign minister of Denmark and other ministers, and they're very, very concerned. What I find most interesting and actually heartening is that NATO countries, I think 6 NATO countries, are now sending their troops to Greenland ahead of whatever Trump might want to do. Does this mean that there may be a battle between American troops and NATO troops in Greenland? I don't think so, and certainly we'd never want that to happen. But the argument of Greenland being indefensible is now being dealt with by NATO countries, our allies, sending their troops and saying, hey, we're here now, we can deploy, and we're going to stick around for a while or maybe forever. And we as NATO will defend Greenland on behalf of Denmark. And Denmark has its own troops there. A very, very interesting and important thing happened. Bottom line of this is we don't need to own Greenland. This is not a real estate deal. This is not where you're going to build a Trump hotel or whatever. This is a fundamental international problem that Trump has created. And the NATO countries, our allies, are showing that America, you don't need to own Greenland. You don't need to be the only military there. NATO countries.
Why is he so obsessed with it then? What's his obsession with Greenland?
I think he sees it as the biggest real estate deal ever. We're talking about millions of acres. We're talking about perhaps resources of one sort or another. Although last night talking to the representatives from Denmark, they say in 2004, the United States companies came to us and wanted to explore for minerals. And we said, fine, gave them the necessary permits. No American company has, since 2004, approached Denmark and Greenland for the exploration of minerals. So clearly, Trump's looking at this as some sort of a real estate deal where he can control the minerals, just as he has changed the narrative in Venezuela from one of drugs to oil. Donald Trump now controls the oil in Venezuela. Maybe he wants to control the unknown mineral resources of Greenland. He talks about it as being a pushing back on China and Russia.
Yeah.
Which at the moment, China and Russia are not engaged in any way in Greenland, and clearly can be worked out with Denmark and the government of Greenland that you're not going to do any deals with China and Russia.
If Trump does seize Greenland, is that the end of NATO?
If the United States invades a NATO country, Greenland, it may very well tear apart NATO. And can you put that back together? I don't know. I'm curious about this. I guess I am a little conspiracy theorist here. Donald Trump had an hour and a half private conversation. Nobody else except the interpreters attended that. Nothing was reported. Did Putin say, if you did this in Greenland, and if you did this with regard to funding Poland, then I can succeed? Because NATO would be destroyed or significantly weakened, all to the benefit of Putin. I do not trust Trump and where he wants to go, but what he would do and has actually done in the past. Greenland is new. If we force ourselves upon Greenland, it would be a serious, serious blow because we would be invading a NATO country. How does Article 5 work in that situation? It doesn't. But we also know that Trump has been repeatedly in his first term and in his second term unhappy with NATO. He did all but to destroy NATO, or tried to do it, in his first term. For whose benefit? Well, for the benefit of Trump? No. But for the benefit of Putin? Yes. So we have to be very aware here. We must assume the worst about Donald Trump. And, is the Greenland play more than just control of the area, or is it to tear NATO apart? Maybe both.
Congressman John Garamendi of California, thank you, sir. Go save us, please. Thank you.
Keep the good word out there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Your support means the world to us. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss a show. We're live every weekday at 10 a.m. and 5 p.m. Eastern Time with new clips dropping at 2 p. and 8 p. And if you want even more Don Lemon Show content, join the Lemon community. Members get exclusive posts, behind-the-scenes videos, and live chats just for you. So hit the join button or visit our channel page to sign up. Thanks again for all your love and your support, and I'll see you next time.